Hi, and welcome to this case in point lecture. In here, I would like to go over a concrete use case where I was involved into defining an as-is customer journey for clients wanting to switch to a new pension insurance product. The goal was to make sure that the transition happened as smoothly as possible and to use this window of opportunity to acquire new customers. But first, let me give you a little bit more context around the project. The sudden rise of inflation has wiped out returns for guaranteed income pension insurance products. These type of products are called TAC 21. A possible solution to protect returns from inflation was to move customers to a more risky asset class of insurance products, which are called TAC 23. These products come with a potentially higher return, but this is not guaranteed, and losses are also possible. Of course, a prerequisite is to ask the customers for their approval and check if their products fit their risk profile. Our mission consisted of mapping the existing or as-is customer journey and to identify customer experience friction points that should be improved. I will first go over the customer journey characteristics and then go over the different building blocks. So, the first characteristic that we need to define upfront was the reliability of the customer journey map. We decided to base a customer journey map on actual research, where we used two types of sources, being one-on-one interviews and observations. The one-on-one interviews were done with customers that just switched to the new TAC 23 insurance product. We were especially interested in knowing what their overall experience was during the whole transition, and to describe every step as best as they could. A tip that I can give you here is to ask questions that link back to the building blocks of the customer journey. Next to the interviews, we also did observations, where we looked for volunteers that were willing to do the switch and to observe all the steps that they took. This approach is more exhaustive than the interview, as the observer is able to pick up more things that somebody who is doing the process might not notice themselves. The next characteristic that we had to define was the state of the customer journey. So remember that a customer journey map can visualize the current experience, also known as the current state journey map, or can be used to visualize the future experience, also known as the future state journey map. So in our case, we went with the current state customer journey map, as we first wanted to find existing friction points that we could target with specific improvements. These improvements can then be mapped in the future experience journey map. Let's move on now to the next characteristic, which is the main actor perspective. In our case, the main actor is an external customer that subscribes to a new insurance product. Up next, we have the scope and scale characteristic, which helps us define the level of detail of the journey maps. Here we decided to start our scope with the inflation increase and make it stop with the subscription to the new product. We could also take servicing into account, but this was not in scope for our stakeholder. As we were in the beginning of the project, we kept the scale at a high level, but we would have been able to dive deeper into every step of the journey and further define the sub-steps. As for our final characteristic, we need to consider the focus of our journey. Remember, this characteristic looks at whether the journey map is product-centered or experience-centered. We opted for an experience-centered approach. This means that we also looked at touch points where the user was not directly in contact with the product. This would enable us to identify less obvious friction points where our stakeholder could also play a role to offer our customers with a better user experience, where competition might not look at. Let's now go over the different building blocks. Before drawing the stages and the steps, we first defined who we were drawing the customer journey for. We used an existing persona that the bank was already well informed about. The most important requirement we had for our main actor was that they were concerned about protecting their capital from inflation and that they already possessed a pension saving product. When it comes to stages, we kept it pretty straightforward. We just used the basic stages of awareness, research, and purchase. They represent the state of mind of our customer. As I said before, we could also have added servicing, but this was out of scope. Next, we have the steps. We were able to identify these thanks to the observations and one-on-one interviews that we conducted with actual customers. Basically, we have 6 steps, which can further be divided into sub-steps, if need be. These 6 steps were being aware of the inflation increase due to the crisis, being aware of the negative impact on the pension insurance profitability, searching the web for alternative products, talk it over with the insurance broker, receive and review offers for alternative pension products, and finally subscribe to the new pension product. A tip that I can give you here is to always include verbs in your steps. You want your steps to present an action that the user executes. Adding verbs makes this step more active. Then we have the storyboard. This is simply used to make the whole customer journey more readable and increases empathy with the user for the design team. We used a mix of facial expressions and pictures to convey what's in the steps. Continuing with the emotional journey. It depicts how satisfied or dissatisfied the user was at each specific step. We were able to identify this information by asking customers directly how they experienced a specific step and by also observing their body language. As you can see, customers were quite unhappy when they discovered that the inflation was impacting their savings. But we also noticed that they were unhappy at the moment of subscribing to this new product. This was mainly due to the amount of documents that they had to print, read, sign, scan and send again. Also, there was some back and forth with the contracting department, as not all documents were very very Next up, we have to identify in which channel the steps happened. Here we quickly noticed that the full process was not very digital. Important parts of the journey were still done over the phone or physical meetings, and documents were signed physically. Next, we also displayed the main stakeholders that were involved at each step. We noticed that within the last steps, a stakeholder from the contracting department would also contribute. We noticed that they did not have the same level of customer care compared to the insurance broker, for instance. This became quite clear in the last step, when the customer had questions around the contract, which are not answered clearly by the contracting team. In adding to this lack of customer care, the contracting team doesn't have all the information regarding the needs of the customers, so they can't always answer the customer and have to involve the broker again. This ping-pong between the broker and the contracting team doesn't really convey a professional image to the customer. Then we have the dramatic arc. Here we depicted how engaged the customers felt with this particular step. This is different from the satisfaction, as you can be very engaged without being happy. Just think of when you are driving on a busy motorway, for instance. Engaged, but not especially happy or unhappy. We were able to filter this information out from the interviews and observation sessions again. You especially have to pay attention to the points where there is a high engagement and a low satisfaction. These are major experience friction points that have to be tackled. As you can see, the last step has quite a high engagement, but the customer is not very satisfied with the current process. So this is definitely a step that needs to be improved. The same goes with the second step. Perhaps the insurance company could play a more prominent role here. We also need to think of the unhappy scenarios. We listed a couple ones here, but you can really create a never-ending list on unhappy scenarios. We decided to just list the worst case scenarios at every step and have other unhappy scenarios listed somewhere else. To mention an example, in the last step we listed that a possible scenario was that the customer doesn't sign the documents because there's just too many of them and it's too cumbersome for them to sign them all and send them back. And finally, we have the data building block. Here you want to mention important pieces of qualitative or quantitative data that you were able to pick up during your research. An important piece of information in the fifth step, where that management fees and entry fees are seen as the most important decision factors for customers. And that's it for the customer journey map. With this view, we were able to identify and assess multiple friction points which we could target with a future customer journey map. We especially focused on step 2 and step 6, where we made a proposition to the stakeholder to review their paper-based subscription process and to consider a digital flow. We also proposed that the insurance companies should play a more active role in educating their customers regarding the impact of inflation on their saving and how they could better prepare for it. And now it's your turn. I would like you to draw a customer journey that you're familiar with. You basically need to do 3 things. First, you need to define the characteristics of your journey map. Next, you have to define the building blocks. And finally, I want you to identify friction points that you would like to prioritize. If you can't think of any customer journey map examples, don't worry, I have a couple ones listed here for you. Going to a fancy restaurant, taking the plane, buying a pair of headphones, buying a couch with your partner, making breakfast, or preparing a job interview. If you happen to have questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I will definitely do my best to help you out as much as I can. So the only thing that remains for me to do is to wish you good luck with the assignment and to have fun. Bye.